You know that feeling that
Mm.
something you have with someone that isn't quite a defined relationship,
Hmm.
but it's definitely more than just like casual friends. It almost feels like there's this whole new kind of connection popping up, this really blurry space. So that's what we're diving deep into today, the situationship.
Absolutely. So it's a dynamic I think many of you listening have probably come across, maybe even been in.
Hmm.
For this deep dive, we're digging into an article that really tries to unpack the whole thing.
Yeah.
What a situationship actually is, what's behind them, and importantly, how you figure out if it's actually right for you. Our goal here is to, well, cut through some of that confusion, hopefully give you some clarity on this whole modern relationship thing.
Okay, let's unpack this then. A situationship. It kind of sounds like we just finally put a label on something that's maybe always existed, but now it's more out in the open. What's the core definition we're working with?
Yeah, good point. The article we've been looking at, it defines it as essentially a casual connection that's just lacking those explicit agreements or, future expectations that you'd find in a more committed relationship. Think of it like it exists in that space between being a proper couple and just being friends. The article actually uses this image of a bridge, one that hasn't quite connected fully to either side yet.
A bridge, maybe going nowhere specific. That whole vibe of let's just see where it goes seems pretty central, doesn't it? Like no real destination planned.
Precisely. That lack of a clear path forward, that's a really key characteristic. It's this whole attitude of um, exploring things without the explicit goal or maybe the pressure of building something long term.
Okay, so how can you actually tell if you're in one of these situationships? Are there really obvious signs or is it more subtle? Feels like it could be easy to get the signals wrong.
That's a really good point about misreading things. The article does highlight some pretty telling indicators. Yeah. One big one is often really inconsistent communication.
And consider.
Yeah, like you might have these intense periods where you're talking all the time, loads of texts, calls, seeing each other a lot, and then suddenly just drops off. Silence. And actually, this kind of intermittent contact can sometimes create a stronger, but maybe not healthier, bond for the person wanting more. They kind of cling to those highs during the quiet times.
Huh. That's interesting about the inconsistent contact making you feel more attached, like the unpredictability kind of hooks you in. What else? What else should people look out for?
Okay, another big one is limited personal involvement.
Meaning.
Like, have you met their host friends? Do they know your family?
Mm.
In a situationship, there's often very minimal integration into each other's wider social circles, which kind of makes sense, right? If you're not really planning a future, introducing someone to your core group feels different. It carries more weight.
Yeah, definitely. It's like there's this unspoken thing about keeping things contained, separate. What about planning for the future? If that's missing, is that also a sign?
Oh, absolutely. A real lack of future planning is a very strong indicator. Conversations about holidays coming up or big life events or even just making plans beyond the next, like casual meetup, they're usually just not there. The focus tends to lean pretty heavily on physical intimacy. Sometimes that becomes the main way you connect.
Right.
And that can sort of overshadow developing deeper emotional ties. This can also lead to fuzzy boundaries like, are we exclusive? Is it okay to text whenever? Can I actually rely on this person if I'm having a bad day?
So lots of physical closeness, maybe, but not really those deep talks where you properly get to know someone's inner world. I had a friend describe something like that, feeling really physically connected, but realizing they knew almost nothing about the person's actual life or worries.
Exactly. And that often leads to what the article calls ambiguous boundaries.
Hmm.
What's okay, what's not okay, exclusivity, how often you talk, emotional support, it's just not clearly defined or agreed upon. Meetups might feel more based on convenience too,
Yeah.
like a last-minute text fitting you into a gap rather than a real proactive, I want to spend quality time with you kind of thing.
Mm.
And ultimately, a feeling that often comes up is just feeling like you're not really high priority in their life.
Oof. That feeling of not being a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like it could be really draining emotionally. So, okay, with all these potential downsides, why do people even get into situationships? What are the reasons behind them?
Well, the article gigs into several key things. Fear of commitment is definitely a big one for some people. That could come from, bad experiences in the past, or maybe just really valuing independence, or even feeling societal pressure against settling down too soon. For others, it might just be where they are in life. Maybe they're pouring everything into their career or school, and they honestly feel like they just don't have the time or energy for a serious relationship right now.
So it's almost like a A low-stakes way to have some connection without all the heavy lifting of a committed relationship.
For some, yeah, that's exactly the appeal. There's also the desire to keep options open. Some people might not want to fully commit because they still want to see who else is out there. And let's face it, the perceived ease of a situationship, lower demands, fewer expectations compared to a full-on partnership that can be tempting too. And then, unfortunately, like we kind of touched on, sometimes people just walk into it with totally different ideas about what it is. So it starts off on a shaky foundation of misunderstanding.
Yeah, that mismatch of expectations. That feels like where things really go sideways. So this leads to the big question. Are situationships bad? Should everyone be aiming for those clearly labeled relationships with anniversaries and future plans?
The article gives a really balanced view on this. It says,
Yeah.
situationships aren't inherently good or bad. Whether they're okay really boils down to whether expectations align between the two people. So a situationship can be absolutely fine, even really enjoyable, but only when both people genuinely want the same thing. Something casual, non-committal. If you're both looking for fun, maybe some companionship, physical connection, without that weight of serious promises or future obligations, it can actually work well for that specific time.
So it's all about mutual understanding and both people being genuinely happy with the casual setup. That's the key.
Exactly. That alignment is crucial. The problems really start when there's a gap in what each person wants. If one person is kind of secretly hoping it'll turn into something more serious, develop into a committed relationship, while the other person is perfectly happy keeping it casual, well, that's fertile ground for emotional distress, insecurity, all that imbalance. The article really stresses that if you find yourself consistently feeling insecure or confused about where you stand, or just like your needs aren't being met, those are huge red flags. Big signs the situationship probably isn't good for your emotional health.
Right. Feeling consistently bad or confused. That's your cue that this setup isn't working for you.
So, okay, if someone's listening now and they're recognizing themselves in this and maybe they're feeling a bit uneasy about it,
Yeah.
what can they do? What steps does the article suggest? Yeah, it offers some really solid practical advice. First step, honest self-reflection. Really important. You've got to dig deep and ask yourself, what do I truly want from a relationship right now? Am I genuinely okay with casual, or am I actually longing for something deeper, something more committed? There's no right or wrong answer here, but getting clear on your own needs is absolutely step one.
That makes total sense. You can't figure out the map if you don't know where you want to go. What comes after figuring that out?
Then comes the potentially tricky part, open and direct communication with the other person. You need to try and share how you're feeling, what your expectations are, and also try to understand where they're coming from. It might feel awkward, definitely, but it's so vital for getting clarity. And if you decide you do want to continue the situationship, the article advises setting clear boundaries.
Ah,
Yeah,
you're
actually talking about things like how often will we see each other? Are we seeing other people? What level of emotional support is okay to expect?
so kind of defining the undefined parts proactively to get some predictability and protect yourself a bit.
Precisely.
Mm.
And maybe the most crucial piece of advice is to prioritize your own emotional well-being. Always. If this situationship consistently makes you feel unhappy or unfulfilled or anxious, you absolutely have the right, maybe even responsibility to yourself to walk away. It really all circles back to honesty, doesn't it? Being honest with them about how you feel and what your boundaries are, but maybe even more importantly, being brutally honest with yourself about what you truly want and need.
Wow, yeah. It really sounds like navigating this territory takes a good amount of self-awareness and maybe some courage too. Courage to have those tough conversations and courage to leave if it's not right.
Absolutely it does. Situationships. They might seem casual on the surface, but they're actually pretty complex relationship dynamics.
Yeah.
I think the main takeaway from digging into this article is just how vital clarity is. Clarity within yourself and clarity in your communication. If both people are genuinely happy and on the same page about wanting something casual, non-committal, then yeah, maybe a situationship can exist without causing major harm. But the moment those expectations don't line up, when one person wants that deeper connection that just isn't being offered, that's when it can become really emotionally taxing.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. As you think about your own connections, the ones you have now or ones you might have in the future, ask yourself this. Do these relationships, whatever label they have or don't have, truly line up with your core need to feel valued, to feel secure, to feel understood? Because really, at the end of the day, no matter what you call it, everyone deserves relationships where they feel exactly that.